So, welcome back for with Policing TV for part two of the interviews with David Price, Chief of Police down in the South Atlantic in St Helena. In our first conversation, David, we spoke about your very varied and interesting career in UK policing, and you're now down on the beautiful island of St Helena in the South Atlantic, where you've been for a number of years. So I want to really just explore your time down there. So my first question to you is really from Liverpool to Cheshire and then to St Helena. And I got the first move, but I just wonder what took you down to St Helena when you moved there originally to take up the post.
Well, Trevor, at the point I was at once I reached my 30 years in the UK, I was still enjoying myself. I was 52 years old. Didn't feel like I was ready to give up, so was quite happy to stay in the role I had as the ops manager for the Joint Firearms and Dog Unit with Cheshire and North Wales. While I looked for something different and decided what I wanted to do. I didn't want to finish work. I didn't want to just retire and put my feet up. I thought there was something else out there. And then one idle Saturday afternoon, browsing the internet while my wife was downstairs watching, I forget what it was, on television or something, on an advert cropped up for the operations chief inspector on St Helena, for the St Helena Police. And when I read the role profile, strangely, and you touched on this in our previous conversation, my career path and the sort of skills and aptitudes I'd developed almost exactly met this role profile, which was most unusual because I normally didn't find anything that I met everything of. So I had a look at it and went downstairs and said to Jill, what do you think about this? There's a job in St Helena in the South Atlantic. How do you feel? 2 years down there. What do you think? She said, well, why don't you go for it? What's the worst that could happen? You could get it. She said, but if you do it, you're going, not me, because my wife was a teacher and she was still working at that point. So she had her own career that she wanted. So I applied, rang up the government office in London for St Helena, try and find out a little bit more about the job. Was fortunate they put me in touch with the chief inspector who had the role, who's a guy called Mike Miskell. We've been here for a little while, so I managed to chat to him before the interview. Supposed to go down to London for an interview, but that got cancelled the day before because of illness, and then eventually did an online interview, which was absolutely bad news. I'd never done an online interview in my life. Wasn't used to it. Found it an incredibly disconcerting experience to be sat in my own bedroom trying to do an interview. Thankfully, our daughter was home at the time because she then took control of the cat, whose favourite place whenever I was sitting in front of the computer from me. And I decided, looking like Blofeld for an interview, stroking a cat probably wouldn't be the image I was trying to convey in terms of professionalism. So the cat was knocked out. I did the interview in, I think it was early June of 2019. Was told about a week to 10 days later I'd been successful, and then started wrestling with what on earth have I done, and how on earth do I move myself to the South Atlantic? Thankfully, by that point, Mike was back in the UK and he lived in Stockport. So at the cost of, I think it was 2 or 3 all-day breakfasts at a pub halfway between Liverpool and Stockport, I managed to have quite a lot of time with him. And so he gave me a good insight into what I was walking into. And then once I've completed all the clearances and gone down to London to the government office to meet government representative Kedal and sign the contract, I put my resignation in, announced where I was going, had to explain where St Helena was. Numerous people said to me, oh, well, that's all right, you can fly home at the weekends. I said, well, where do you think it is? Well, St Helena's in the Channel Islands, isn't it? I said, no, that's St Helier. St Helena's a bit further away and only has 1 flight a week. After I'd told a few people, I think it was about a week or 10 days later, I got a phone call from one of the officers I knew in professional standards to tell me that in their internet monitoring, the most inappropriate police search on the police search engines for the last week had been St Helena. And would I mind doing some kind of release through the press office to tell people where it was, so people would stop doing St Helena as a Google search? So I did a little bit of a story with the press about where I was going, including a map. I did at that point offer that anyone who was passing St Helena was free to drop in. Nobody has yet, but given where we are, that's not entirely surprising. So September 2019, I got on a plane at Manchester, flew to Heathrow, then overnight to Johannesburg, and then arrived at St Helena on a very sunny September Saturday morning. St Helena's the word unique can be slightly overused, and you know, Trevor, because obviously you were here for several years. But the arrival at the airport, unlike you arrived by boat. The airport was about a year old by the time I got there. Coming off the aeroplane, it looks like you've arrived on the moon somewhere. The landscape is very dry, very grey, very stony. And as you drive through the island, between there and Gates, where the police station is, and half where I live, you go through multiple different environments, going from grey to green, back to brown and dry, and damp in places. So I started then as Chief Inspector of Operations, Deputy Chief of Police, which meant that whenever the chief went off island, I was acting. I had an entertaining first week where I was left with a task. We were having a visit from the Angolan Vice President the following week, and I was, as I was a firearms commander, I was given the task of managing that. It was a private visit, it wasn't an official one. It was just him coming over for a holiday. But we had an advanced team arrive on the Wednesday, who really hadn't done their homework, because when they arrived at the airport, they were asking us where they went to hire a fleet of limousines for the Vice President. When we stopped laughing, we explained to them that limousines were in somewhat short supply, but we knew where they could find a couple of decent Ford Focuses. So we pointed them in those directions, took them off into town, deposited them in the hotel, and left them to sort out the arrangements for him to arrive the following weekend. The next morning, I was somewhat surprised, as was the DCI and the Deputy Governor, who've also been involved in planning it, to hear on the radio. Radio announced that we've been invaded by a team of Angolan mercenaries who were now staying at the hotel, because they'd put two and two together and got 222, I think, never mind 4, and decided that this team of Angolans were actually mercenaries rather than, I think there was a cook, an aide de camp, and various other people who were there. Not a firearm or anything between them, but with the Deputy Governor having to go on the radio and reassure the community that we weren't being invaded. It was simply that there was a visit coming up, that was a private visit and didn't need to be told about. So that was an interesting introduction to St Helena. The first few months, very much finding my feet, getting used to the idea of being in a very different environment. It's a challenge going from UK policing into St Helena. The environment looks very, very familiar. In places in parts of the Yorkshire Dales or a village or a small town somewhere. The currency is the same. The notes are different, but it's still a pound. Drive on the left-hand side of the road. Speed limits are much lower, 30 mile an hour maximums. But when you've been here for a while, 30 miles an hour on some of the curly roads with large drop-offs can seem very, very fast indeed. And in many ways, it's just familiar enough to lure you into a false sense of security that you know what's happening. But when you move into any place as a new police officer, trying to learn and understand the community is really big. It's a small community. Everybody knows what you do. For the first couple of weeks arriving here, being stopped in the street, hello, who are you? What are you here for? Because everybody realises that you're different from you. And getting to know people and having those opportunities to start working with the community and joining in with events. The island has a population of just over 4,000 people. The Ascension Island that we're also responsible for. So, as I say, my first few months here were really interesting and very, very enjoyable. My wife came out and visited me in November, so I'd been here for about 2 months. So I was able to show her the island, and we were able to um, have a really good uh, couple of weeks together with her learning a little bit about St Helena, and so that when we were WhatsApp calling and I was explaining what I've been doing and where, she had some idea about what I was talking about. At that stage, little did we know that we wouldn't actually see one another for another 21 months after that, because obviously in the beginning of 2020, the first apparent coronavirus pandemic started kicking in, and then in March 2020, our airlink was cut. We didn't have our regular air service was suspended, along with most international flights. We went back onto occasional repatriation flights, initially every few months, then every 6 weeks. And that maintained through until March 2022, when we went back to before the scheduled air service started again. Working in the pandemic in such a small community was really interesting. Again, the skills that I'd developed during my career in the UK proved really, really useful. I was part of the role of the police service here. We provide a lot of support to the emergency planning team, which is only one or two people at best. So I was helping out with a lot of the work around the planning and the strategies. And obviously, the island was creating new regulations to cope with arrivals. Quarantine was introduced. Concerns around visiting yachts, because while the aircraft stopped, the yachts hadn't, and how we manage yacht people, and being exposed to almost, I mean, St Helena is a overseas territory nation, but you're dealing with effectively national issues for the island. The island has been reasonably isolated for many years. The RMS, St Helena, one of the last military. That was the only means of getting to and from it for a long time. And to be fair, many of the islanders hark back nostalgically to those days where they could all go down to the seafront, watch the ship come in, see who came off it, see who was getting back on it, and sail off over the horizon. But the exposure, I'm finding how close you are in such a small organisation to the governor, who is the Crown's representative here, working with the senior civil servants, the politicians. You're dealing with everything from the most low-level neighbourhood issues, or who's parked in a disabled bay today, right up to the drafting of national legislation, which is something I'd never imagined I'd be doing, and certainly never had no experience of working on those kind of levels. COVID, as I say, was a challenge. The initial reaction of the island was and actually, with all the measures put in place, there was never a COVID case out of quarantine until the island reopened in August 2022. So we were incredibly fortunate that the quarantine system worked very well. As a police service, we had a role in trying to help that be enforced. It was necessary, but as with most places in the world, compliance was really, really high. The community knew it was in their interests to do what they needed to do, and the vast majority of people stayed where they should have done and didn't do anything wrong. So that made life a lot easier during that time.
David, I think we're just about to come on to it, but on a personal level, St Helena didn't have the restrictions the other parts of the world had, but you had your own restrictions. So just on a personal level for you, how hard was it to be isolated from the UK, and particularly your family, during that period?
It was hard, but very, very quickly, Jill and I, and we've got one daughter, Beth. Jill and Bethan were at home together for most of the lockdowns. Bethan works in the theatre, so all of her work came to a shuddering halt with all the COVID restrictions. So they were at home together, which I found really reassuring, because I knew they were both together and I knew they were looking after one another. Thankfully, although at that point our internet was very slow, it was more like quite fast dial-up rather than what we've got now, which is more broadband. But we were able to talk every day on WhatsApp. I think without WhatsApp, if it had been in the days before those kind of apps, I really would have found it very much more difficult. The other point was that it wasn't our fault. It wasn't like I was staying here and refusing to go home, or Jill was refusing to come out. We just simply couldn't. So automatically, we had to make the best of it as it was, and talk a lot. And while I'd complain about being isolated, but being able to go out and still play cricket or go for a walk or wander around the shops and talk to people, they complain about being locked in the house and not being able to get out. So the restrictions went well on both sides. I mean, from a personal perspective, at one point I
Yes.
was playing cricket at that point here for one of the teams. The ICC actually did an article, a video link onto St Helena, because apparently we were about the only place still playing cricket in the world, because everywhere else had shut down. So that was quite nice. We only had 17 people, but we all decided we would probably play with one of the top 7 teams in world cricket at that particular moment, which is probably the only time we'll ever get to do that. But no, it was different. Having to manage those the demands and being stuck here. There were T-shirts made standing on St Helena and loving it, which were very popular amongst the people who were wandering around the island. We did have visitors. The flights did start to get going again. We had, at that point, direct flights to Stansted. There was an airline called Titan that would do the repatriation flights for us. So that was actually quite good for a lot of people when they were able to get off the island and wanted to go to the UK. You didn't have to go to South Africa because that border was shut. So it was different. And in September 2020, more success, my predecessor David Lynch left the island, and I took over as acting chief then. So taking a step up more or less permanently for several months thereafter, and taking responsibility for the service here and on Ascension, was again something I never imagined I'd be doing. I always fancied in the UK the idea of broadening my horizons and looking at policing overseas, but the opportunity had never presented itself. To suddenly find myself not only overseas but now, well, at that point, the acting chief of police was really, well, it was hugely rewarding. It's a challenge, but it's hugely rewarding. Policing such a small community, as I said before,
what do you see, David, as the key challenges then?
Predominantly understanding the community, moving in as an outsider and trying to police a community. If you do that in the UK and you move from one neighbourhood to another, you have to learn about it. And here, you really have to get to try and understand what is going on. Pre-internet and even post-internet, St Helena has an absolutely ruthlessly efficient grapevine in terms of sharing information. The way that the facts, or sometimes guesses, supposition, or rumours will flow around the island without any electronic assistance whatsoever is amazing. Because everybody knows everyone, and at various times you will get. It's very difficult as an individual on an individual basis to be off duty. Because everybody knows who you are and what you're doing. I get used to answering to chief whether I'm dressed like this or in a t-shirt and jeans. If I'm refereeing a football match and I make a bad decision, it's not our ref, it's our chief. What are you doing? So there's always those things. Excuse me. I thought I'd unplug that. Right. So yeah, I'll go back to that. So yeah, you're never off duty. You can always be recognised for what you are. And going back to the UK, it was often quite nice to be able to blend into the background and do what you wanted to and relax. Whereas here, for me and for the other officers, it's a real challenge. And that's one of the major issues we have in such a small community, is trying to recruit potential and develop potential officers from within the community. It's very, very hard for them to learn policing in an environment where, because of the small size of the population, because many of the families have been here for generations, they will find themselves dealing with people they know almost all the times. I can count probably on the fingers of both hands the number of times I came across somebody I knew from outside policing in a policing context in the UK. Whereas here, quite literally every day, the officers will know somebody, and in many cases be related to somebody we're having to have dealings with, either as a victim or a suspect. That makes it really challenging for them to learn. And the key issue we've been wrestling with for a very long time, even going back to your days, is the retention of officers, keeping them through that development period so that they build their skills and abilities. Yeah. We've got now a rolling 5-year development plan that's in the third year, where we're trying to encourage people's development and keep them long enough. We've got one of our first officers now on a development program towards sergeant. He's now a temporary sergeant, and hopefully, if he completes his portfolio in the next 2 or 3 months, will sit aboard and will be the first local promotion. I think since perhaps you promoted some people in about 2015. We haven't had anybody promoted since then. So that's a real challenge. We have obviously very, very limited resources. The police service here at full strength across both islands should add up to just over about 30 people. In practice, we rarely exceed low 20s because we're almost always carrying vacancies. We rely very heavily on the experience from ex-UK officers. We have a program called the Technical Cooperation Program, which is funded by the FCDO. So some of our officers, me included, are funded through that program. So we bring in people from other services, generally from the UK, to supplement the skills that we haven't got and try and help to develop our local officers into those areas, whether it be vertically in terms of supervision or laterally in terms of specialisms. So it's a real challenge.
So if David, if you were going to get support from the UK, sorry, I was just going to say the TC contract, technical cooperation contract, or anyone else coming out. What would be your advice if someone is looking at an advert now or looking at an opportunity and thinking, gosh, I've got a lot of experience, I could come to St Helena. What would be your advice to them, both in terms of deciding whether they should go and then if they come, how they should be when they arrive?
I think my advice to anybody would be, if you're going to do it, find out as much about what you're walking into before you get here as you can. It is different. To me, one flight a week now seems great because I went through 18 months with one flight every 6 weeks. So that seem quite accessible. But sadly, there have been issues where family help, particularly family issues or family bereavements, have taken place for officers and staff who are out here, where if it happens on a Sunday, you can't leave the island for a week. You've got to wait for it. So understand the situation that you're going into. Have the courage to take the chance and do something different, and bring the skills that you've invested your time and effort in the UK or wherever in developing during your policing career, and use them for the benefit of a community that is trying desperately hard to bring its own officers and staff up to the same sort of levels of experience and ability and capability that you've had. Understand the limitations of what you're walking into. We are, as I say, a very small service. We don't have all the specialist skills that you would expect in the UK. And if we do have something serious that happens, we have to rely very heavily on support from the SCDO policing advisor, Andrew Monday, or from IPAS at the Home Office or the National Police Operations Centre in providing us with the skills that we might need or the remote support that we might need. Don't expect this to be just like policing another area of the UK. Law is similar, but St Helena, like most of the overseas territories, has its own set of laws. We have a pace ordinance that mimics the pace in the UK, but it is significantly out of date. It was last updated in 2003. So on the one hand, it's good because it provides the basis for how we treat people and how we investigate matters. On the other hand, our code as a practice code, separate code B. So EFG and H have never reached St Helena yet. We hope that they will one day, but they just haven't made it. So you need to be careful about not just assuming that the law that you're familiar with, the law that you've been brought up on and years working with, is exactly the same as here. We have the same offences under the Public Order Act, but for reasons that are lost in the dim and distant past, they all have different numbers. So what's a Section 4 in the UK is a Section 6 here. How we got 2 extra sections, I don't know. but we did. We still have the old original PACE definition of an arrestable offence here, which dictates certain of your other powers, notably for search after arrest. Whereas in the UK, we moved away from that many years ago. So it's quite easy to get caught out if you don't pay attention to the details.
And David, what? Yeah, I mean, the devil is in the detail, isn't it? So, and what would you see? Just wrapping up this now. What would you see as the challenges going forward now? Because you've had a big period. You take great credit for a really significant number of developments on the island. You know, I know you've revamped the custody from start to finish, and I know what it was like before, and I know what it's like now, and you take great credit for that. And but what do you see as the challenges over the next 5 years? What are the things that may come over the hill or are starting to come over the hill now that are going to challenge you in the rest of your time there and the next chief and the next chief after?
I think a lot of the challenges are to do with the island and the island's health, both physical health and financial health. St Helena, unlike some of the other territories, isn't blessed with mineral resources that can fund it. We are supported by the overseas development funding from the UK largely because we don't have the exports. We're not, again, blessed by the geographic position. There's not a great deal. It's not easy to get product off the island to make money. The opening up of the island through the air link and through the internet has provided the population with an insight into what's going on elsewhere in the world, and also enabled them to apply for jobs in the rest of the world. And as a result, certainly over the last 2 or 3 years, and probably go back beyond that, there's been a decided migration of young and middle-aged people and families away from the island to take better paid jobs, either on Ascension or the Falklands, which is very popular, or even back in the UK or elsewhere in the world. That's going to be a huge challenge. The population here is aging dramatically. Even before the airport opened, there was a tradition for saints to go overseas, earn money, build their own house, and come back here in perhaps their 50s or 60s and enjoy their retirement back on this beautiful island. That is having effect because obviously the health needs of an aging population are very much more than for a younger population. And the health service here, quite understandably, is really struggling to keep pace with the demands on it. Healthcare is a really expensive function, and to have to deliver it in the middle of the South Atlantic on a small island is a real challenge for them. That's going to be a challenge. I think how we respond to the internet and the issues that brings with it, good and bad, will be a challenge for the island and for the police service. We've already seen some of the issues around internet crime starting to build up. The island is very inexperienced in its use of technology. The internet only arrived here in 2015 and mobile phones at the same time. So the population here has gone from zero to smartphone in one step, whereas at least in the UK we had the benefit, those of us who were old enough anyway, of seeing personal computers come and then dial-up internet and text messaging and BlackBerry messaging and all the lessons we learned, mostly through bitter experience during those periods. The islands have to learn in a very condensed way through smartphones, and as with everywhere else, the youngsters like to support it. Most of the old people are still looking at it and wondering what on earth.
Be interested to see the pace of that change, won't it? It'd be extraordinary.
Yeah, and since the internet cable was opened up last October, we've already seen a huge difference in the behaviours on the island. One of the beauties of St Helena with such slow internet was on a lot. You would see people in the street sitting on the veranda of the Consulate Hotel or in the coffee shop or on the seafront, just having a chat. You wouldn't see what you see in the UK, which is people walking around with their heads down into the mobile phone and earbuds. Now, since that's opened up and data's become more affordable, it's still expensive for the majority of the population, but it's more affordable. You see kids sitting on the steps, each engrossed in their own phone, not talking to one another, and the same for adults. So it's bound to have an effect. I said some of it's good, and some of it less so. From a policing perspective, obviously,
And
we then
that's really different for Saint Helena, isn't it?
it is. St Helena's always prided itself on its sense of community and the fact that people talk to one another, and they still do. It's still nowhere near the same level that you would see
Yeah,
in the UK. Um, we're still Most of the youngsters are still dealing with they have Bluetooth big speakers. I'm often sorely tempted to buy a bulk lot of earbuds and give them to people so they don't walk down the street with a boombox on their shoulder playing music. But one of these days they might discover earbuds, but who knows? Um, but no, it has been. And for us as a service, clearly we don't have digital forensic capability at all. We have basic ability to download unlocked phones here, but anything more technical than that has to go back to the UK. And again, in a small force with a very limited budget,
yes,
the cost of that kind of digital forensic capability, or indeed any other forensic capability, quite quickly eats into what I've got available to police the island. Um, so that's going to be a real
yeah,
challenge for me and for whoever takes over from me going forward. And hopefully, we've done a lot of work with
yeah,
SCDO and with the Home Office to try and set up reach back capabilities to the UK, because they are going to be again incredibly important. Because if the island
yeah,
takes advantage of the internet to look at enhanced financial services, or offering digital nomads the chance to work, or satellite ground stations, well, they come with some requirements if we have to investigate an issue involving them. We're going to need to maintain the
yeah,
links with that.
indeed.
We're very
It's
fortunate.
it's going to be a very compressed um, picture of how quickly the internet will grow, or the usage, but also this is my own personal view, that it's gonna, as you said, we had years of this incremental change. St. Lena's going to experience 10, 15 years of progress in, I don't know, as fast as people grasp it, and it's almost a snapshot. It is gonna be compressed, because I think unless you've been to somewhere like St. Helena where there literally almost was no internet, and then they, as you said, they've gone from at best a dial-up which was poor to something which is pretty good now. It's going to compress what we would have seen 15 years or so of change into months. But David, look, I'm just need to. We're just going to wrap this up now. But I just been reflecting on what you're saying, and I think beautiful as Saint Helena is, there's certainly some challenges ahead for the rest of your time there. And I know you're already ahead of this, particularly on some of the digital stuff. But you've just outlined some of the challenges for the future, and beautiful and unique as these islands are, they present those challenges, which are fairly unique even to the UK, and just
Yeah.
trying to get resources to you when new things happen. So thank you for an insight. And I feel I'm in a position to say this. You've done an extraordinary job in your time there, and you should be very proud. I know you haven't finished yet, and but that's good for St. Helena, for stability, in my view. So I just wanted to say thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. And I'm sure people are going to find it very interesting, because it's such a unique environment. And, with the airport opening, and during then COVID, and now the transition with an internet, you've been at the heart of a lot of change for the island, and you should be very proud of what you've done. So I just wanted to thank you on behalf of Policing TV, and people will find it interesting and fascinating, and just wish you and the team best as you go ahead for the months ahead, as it keeps moving forward.
Oh, thank you, Trevor. That's very kind of you to say so. It's been an absolute privilege to have this role on the island, to lead the service through the last few years. Um, and one of the proudest days of my life was when we were given royal status, because we were the ninth out of the 10 services to be given
Mm,
the title royal back in 2022. And that was something I will cherish forever, was being responsible and standing there on a parade at the Queen's Platinum
absolutely.
Jubilee parade, and getting the governor to tell the community, which the community didn't know, that we were now the Royal Saint Helena Police, not just Saint Helena Police. So it has been a pleasure. It's been an absolute
Yeah.
privilege. It's like any job in the police service.
I
It's
still
never
have
ending.
my mug is Pride of Place in my cupboard, David, that you gave me with that on. So now
Yeah.
you should be very proud of that. It's a fantastic achievement for the island. But look, David, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I wish you the best. And again, just thank you for your time out of your what is a busy schedule. It's St Helena, but I know how busy it is for you down there. So I'm really grateful, and I wish you the best.
Oh, thank you, Trevor, and I hope to see you back on the island before I leave.
I'm going to do my very best.